Hey, hey, we're here to kick ass another day. Play the music. Oh, woo!
Let's get into it.
Oh my goodness, we have our energy ready tonight, don't we?
Yes. Oh my gosh. I'm gonna need it for this episode.
Oh my, we are absolutely ready for this episode. Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to Restitching the Tapestry. It is September 19th, 2024, a Thursday, and it is 8:31. I don't know why I'm being so specific at the time these days. But we are back and we are ready to go. We had an off week and now we are energized and ready to talk about cults tonight. And I know this has been a topic that quite a few people have been waiting for. Um,
Goodness.
I know. We've been kind of teasing it all season because we've had moments since the first episode of the season where we've kind of like peppered in like just a reference here or there, So yeah. Um, Ari, what have you been doing and how have you been?
Well, I am experiencing burnout right now, and I was talking to you in the back room about it. I have we talked about recondoing my life, decluttering my life, and starting over. I did write for the first time in a week and a half today, and it felt really good. I went down to the beach, and I was just sitting in my car, and there was a nice little lake breeze coming in, and I I felt a little bit of healing. I've been doing tarot videos, and my tarot videos have been just fire recently. Um, so I've been doing tarot videos and not much else. But I did do some writing, and I finally finished a book. I hadn't really read a whole lot in August, so I kind of just enjoyed reading today and being lazy. I just feel like I'm enjoying because our society gives us doesn't really give us the ability to be lazy, that we have to
It
constantly.
doesn't. Yeah, it
So
doesn't.
I was enjoying just not doing a whole lot.
That honestly sounds kind of refreshing. I had a moment. I had a moment today. It's interesting that you mentioned this. How have I been doing? I've been a hot mess. I have been a hot mess express.
Yeah.
But today I had like one of those moments where I had to like stop doing what I was doing because I was so just incredibly overwhelmed by
Mhm.
everything going on. Do you ever have
Yeah.
moments like that
Yep,
where you're
absolutely.
just where you're just like, what is happening right now?
Mhm.
And I think I have a therapy appointment. Not, I don't think I have one this week, but I do next week. And I know I'm going to talk to my therapist, and she is going to be like, Donnie, what are you doing? What are you doing, Donnie? Because I, of course, take on more responsibilities than I should. I need to kind of like rein myself in. So that's been kind of like what I've been struggling with this week. I've had like these moments where I will commit to so many things and say yes to so many things. And I'm like, is my
And then
soul attached to me?
and then you're like, "I'm in the hell of my own creation."
Exactly. Like if I believed hell existed, my hell would be a never-ending to-do list
Yep,
and it just getting ahead of me.
yep.
Um, so I do have an exciting announcement to make on behalf of one of our viewers, Taylor. We all know Taylor Motto, right?
Mhm.
So Taylor actually released an audio drama that everyone I think should check out. It's an
Really?
LGBTQ plus audio drama called Bloom and Brew. And it's so like
Ooh.
I've heard the trailer, but I've not listened to the first episode yet. But if you like LGBTQ plus audio dramas, you can listen to it on Spotify. and all the other streaming platforms as well. So
Will you put a link in the description so I can watch that?
yes, I can put a link in the description of the video. I am pretty stoked. So, but no, I'm excited because it feels really good to like watch. I feel like we've been encouraging of each other of our successes, and I think it's really nice when we see like our viewers who are watching like experience their own successes as well. So
Yeah, I love listening to stuff while I'm just hanging out in bed, and I'll I'll just doodle on my. I just charged my tablet, so I'll doodle while I listen to it. Draw
I
some
love
family together.
that. So we do have a very hefty current event snapshot tonight, everyone. So we will be probably spending the next 10 to 15 minutes talking about current events. So we want to carve out some time to talk about the ongoing crisis in the Middle East. And recently, I mean, obviously, the humanitarian crisis in Gaza is continuing. But Israel just launched an electronic attack on Hezbollah. So, like, I think I'm trying to remember what it was. Like, they somehow targeted like pagers and like
Mhm.
phones and things like that and triggered them
So
to like.
so basically what they did was Israel took a bunch of pagers and they loaded them up with explosives, and then they sold them to Hezbollah, and so Hezbollah went around and they were using them for electronic communications, um, for what could potentially be terrorist activities or whatever. So they were out in public, or they were out and just doing, whatever they were doing, and then in a calculated attack, what they did was, at the same time, simultaneously, they exploded all of the pagers. So I think it was something like 9 people died, and thousands of people were injured around them. These explosives that were in pockets and holding on to the pagers,
Mhm.
so they exploded in faces and all sorts of things. Um, so, I think it's problematic, because they you can't, although, it's, targeting terrorists, you can't understand the intentions, because it also targets, civilians as well, and so, although, you know they are, I think that it's just very messy. It's a very messy situation,
Yeah,
and that it's just it felt very inelegant, and it felt like it was a very, crude tactic, in my opinion, and that it just seemed, not it just it didn't seem like a very good, way of targeting,
it
what
it
what you
it was
wanted
a
to do.
yeah, it felt like a very blatant disregard for life, in my
Mhm.
opinion. And the truth is, I think that it's going to continue to add to the very valid concerns many people have been having about the disregard for the humanitarian situation over there. I just read that there was a day after the pager attacks, there was also a walkie-talkie target, like explosives and walkie-talkies, and that injured. Well, it looked like the statistics are 20 people killed and 450 wounded as Lebanon was hit by a second wave of device explosions. So that's like the fact that it's also happened again adds to that concern, right?
I think that, we've talked about this, that we're both in agreement about, the two-state solution, that we're
Hmm.
basically just pretty much against war in general. Um,
Yeah,
uh, but, I really do believe in a ceasefire, and I believe in not contributing to a humanitarian crisis.
exactly. Yeah, I agree completely. And I know, like, so many people I know, as we get closer to, elections and things like that, they're all often wondering, like, well, what does the future look like from here? Like, what should be done? I do think there needs to be a ceasefire, like you were just saying. I think that, allies need to really strengthen their voices and say like this is not acceptable, this needs to stop, right?
Right.
Like obviously sovereignty should be defended, right?
Right. And
But
I do believe in I believe in innocent victims. I believe in, people who
mhm,
are, not part of what is happening and you know, uh regardless of, casualties that are not part
mhm,
of this. So um I just think that what's happening is just tragic. So
it is, yeah. So I think it's been a while. I mean, it's been what, 2 weeks since we've done an episode. In that time, the next current event snapshot is the Harris versus Trump debate.
yep.
That happened, and it's resulted in a number of celebrities coming out and endorsing Kamala Harris, Taylor Swift being one of them, Billie Eilish, and even my gal Amy Lee of Evanescence, all endorsed Kamala. But it also leads into the other current event snapshot that I really wanted to emphasize today. So during the debate, Trump perpetuated this very dangerous rumor that quote unquote illegal immigrants were quote unquote eating pets in Springfield, Ohio.
Yeah.
And since then, there's been a number of threats to a variety of different institutions in that
Mhm.
city, resulting in school closures and of course like a lot of like racist rhetoric and threats
Yeah.
against the Haitian population specifically.
And it's very concerning because we've been here before with a lot of this racist rhetoric that they use, that Trump has used racist rhetoric to try to mobilize people. And, we had Charlottesville with the tiki torches and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And, it mobilizes people to action, and that words lead to actions. And so it's very it's not a good thing. I don't
Yeah,
think they I think that they say things and I think that they know that it could potentially be harmful to communities, but I think they just don't care.
yeah, that's the gravity of it all. And I think that's why people are continually baffled, like they just, like I feel like so many people struggle to get to the point of realizing that there's just a large swath of people who just don't care about their fellow human being,
Well,
which
they
is very worrying.
Well, they just think it's funny. They think it's funny to make these jokes, and they don't realize that, this affects people.
Hmm. Right. Um, so another interesting thing, well, I want to note the comments first. I don't want to get too far ahead. Tiffany is here. Hello, Tiffany, my dear. And Arby is here. Hello. It's good to see you both. I hope you're doing well today. Um, so what other interesting current event snapshots do we have, Ari?
Oh my god, they found the Titan submersible of what was left of it. I saw a video
Oh,
on YouTube, and, it's about 900 feet from the Titanic.
there is footage of them. Was it the Coast Guard? I think finding it, and it was like very like creepy footage. Like it was like very unsettling. Um,
Yeah.
it kind of, and I've been watching some of the depositions that have been happening where,
It's very
individual,
haunting.
it is very haunting. There's been some depositions happening where people associated with that company, oh, what's the company's name?
Um,
Oh,
it's
I'm blank,
Titan, I think is what it's called, isn't it?
something like that. Is it
Geo something or whatever.
Ocean? I thought it was like Ocean something. I can't remember. Ocean Gate? No, regardless, I'm blanking on that. Um, but 'cause there were so many people who were saying that the person in charge of it was just literally the most reckless, negligent person,
Yeah.
which obviously that results in in the reality that this tragedy happened because of this person's lack of responsibility.
Right. I
Right.
just remember all of the arguments that happened, that it was sort of like, but the thing that was the most sad was that there were children on that submersible. There was a kid,
Yeah.
who was scared and didn't want to be in the sub, and his
Hmm.
dad convinced him to go on the sub, and,
Yeah.
he lost his life, and, he was just a kid, and
Yeah, that's
it's
so
just,
messed up. It's so
yeah,
messed up. Let's see. Tiffany says, I'm doing good. I have a
yeah,
sweater on. Love it's almost sweater weather, though it's been really hot here lately. Um, RP
yeah.
says, I think of the movie every time I hear about the Titanic. I don't blame you. Tiffany says, what a scummy dad. I couldn't agree more. Um, so I wanted to end the current event snapshot on a slightly positive bit of news.
Thank goodness.
Economically speaking, like though like being that I have a mortgage now and I've been like facing the reality of mortgage payments, the Federal Reserve just slashes interest rates for the first time in a long time, which is signaling that our economy is on the upswing. So that means that interest rates are going to be lowering for buyers and those who take out loans. So that is promising, right? We'll see if it actually happens. Right, because like we hear these things sometimes in the media, but is there always follow through? Not always, right?
Did you also hear about the mini moon?
Yes. Oh my gosh, I forgot about this. Ari, do you want to share that?
So at the end of the month, we're going to have a 33-foot asteroid that's going to make 2 orbits around Earth, and we're going to have like a little mini moon until November around Earth.
We're gonna have two moons for the first time.
You won't be
Eh,
able to see it with the naked eye, but I believe that NASA's going to take some video of it.
oh, we know NASA's gonna take some video, like absolutely. That's
Yeah,
kind of cool though.
we're gonna have a little mini moon.
That is so
They said,
cool.
"Don't let the poets know."
Are we ready for the mission statement? I think it's my turn today.
Please, let's do the mission
Uh,
statement.
We live in a dynamic society where social media shapes us by creating greater opportunities for connection. It has led to a developing understanding of the many marginalized communities, the adversity those marginalized communities face, the powers causing the adversity, and those who act as bystanders as atrocities take place in real time. Our goal with this show is to have challenging conversations about social topics, current events, pop culture, and art. Together, let's weave the threads of understanding with what privilege we have in order to learn, educate, and create in a world that's growing.
Hmm.
I'm proud of myself. I read the last half of that without looking at it.
I can't do that yet.
I somehow pulled it off because normally if I look away, it's always a bad thing. So we're talking about cults tonight. Interesting topic.
Ooh, cults.
When did you first start even investigating what a cult is, Ari? Like was it like when was it?
Oh my god. I worried that I was in a cult.
Oh,
So I started seeing information. But back in about 2009, I had an old journal that I had information about cults. Like I was looking into cults. And one of the cults that was in my notebook was the organization that I later joined, which was
oh,
transcendental meditation. And so it was really funny because I was like, that's why I was always like, am I in a cult? Am I in a cult? Because I wrote in my notebook transcendental meditation. And I was like, oh, am I in a cult? So I did a lot of investigating about what a cult was and what it
mm-hmm.
constituted being in a cult. Because a lot of people have a lot of misconceptions about what it means to be in a cult. Um,
Right.
and so I determined that no, it's not actually a cult. especially now since Maharishi has passed. It's more of a business model than it is anything else,
Hmm.
because yeah, there's a lot to it. But yes, it's probably not a cult in my opinion.
That's interesting. I mean, it's interesting that you were kind of investigating it way back in 2009. For me, I don't think I really started thinking about cults that often until um, I think it was during grad school. I kind of went on a deep dive because I read like a piece of literature about cults. And I
Yeah,
was just like, that's something I've never really like
thought
delved
about.
into. Yeah. So
Yeah.
then I started like going down all of these different rabbit holes, like investigating them. So just some comments here. Tiffany says, I've been in a cult, an online cult. I won't mention names actually, but I didn't even realize it was a cult until I left. And then Arby says that I was in the same cult. So as we go through this conversation, if you feel comfortable sharing like experiences, perspectives, you're more than welcome to contribute to the conversation as well. But so let's take it to the drawing board really quick. You know us. We like to begin with a good old definition, right? So if we were to define what a cult is, the first definition, according to Merriam-Webster, is a religion regarded as unorthodox or spurious, also a body of adherents.
So people who join an organization.
Exactly. The second definition is great devotion to a person, idea, object, movement, or work, such as a film or book. That would be like in the context of like, oh, a cult classic, film, right? But I
Yeah.
think that part of the definition kind of expands beyond that. It's a very comprehensive segment of that
Like Rocky
definition.
Rocky Horror is considered a cult classic.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Or as I like to say in the Godzilla fandom, Godzilla versus Biollante is a cult classic
Absolutely.
in our fandom. In our
Mhm.
in our own little group of people. The object of such devotion, a usually small group of people characterized by such devotion. I see like
Taylor Swift is considered a cult under this definition.
exactly like any sort of like fandom of an artist, celebrity, or musician would be considered accurate under that
It's where we
definition.
get cult of personality.
Yeah. And then like the last one is a system of religious beliefs and ritual. Interesting. Do you think that definition is direct enough, or those definitions are direct enough?
Yeah, not well, because usually when you think cult, you think of like scary cult of like, you know, of focused individuals that display like disordered behavior. So I have some behavior patterns of like specific kinds of cults of like how um like of how one gets involved in certain types of cults.
Mm-hmm.
That the kind of cults that pop culture kind of considers what a cult is. Um, the kind of cults that are considered dangerous, and that one finds themselves in, that can ruin a person's life, or that can be detrimental to their well-being. And so because this is kind of like more focused, and I think that's kind of something that we're kind of talking about more specifically in this episode, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So some of the behavior patterns are people who um, isolate their members and penalize them for leaving. So, like
Mm-hmm.
people who say, "Oh, you can leave at any time," but you really can't leave at any time. It's sort of
Mm-hmm.
like if you leave, it's going to be bad for you.
Right. Yeah. So
Um,
just to quickly look at the comments before we go on to the next one on the list. Tiffany says number 2, I think in the definition, is a little closer to what I was in. It was about a content creator in the group was run by said content creator, and this person was a snake in sheep's clothing. Interesting.
mhm,
Interesting. Like I think, and then we'll continue with that list. The one thing I find interesting about that definition is that it kind of dances around the word fanaticism in a way. And I
yeah,
feel like when we think of cults in like media, like there is like that fanaticism that often gets represented. And I think outside of media, like that, it doesn't get really discussed much, like that fanaticism, but it's very much there from what I've observed, right? Anyway, continue with your list.
and I think that part of that fanaticism is one of the behavior patterns of seeking inappropriate loyalty to their leaders,
Mm-hmm.
that it's asking things that are pushing people beyond their personal boundaries, and asking them to do things that are considered inappropriate, that are just, asking too much out of their followers. You have things like Manson asking his followers to, you know, unalive people, or asking people, have Jim Jones asking people to, drink the Kool-Aid, and then they
Mm-hmm.
unalive themselves. It's inappropriate loyalty.
Right. It's interesting. And this honestly should have been in the current event snapshot too, but I think I forgot to put that in there. But um, the artist P. Diddy was just arrested.
Mhm.
Um, and if you look into his history with like the large, like I can't remember what he would call them, but they were like these large gatherings where a lot of like very cultish sort of behaviors took place, often at the expense of people, very
Mhm.
vulnerable people. That like I would definitely say that's a very modern example of that. And then of course there is like that culture of fear like that is perpetuated. Anyway, continue with your list. Sorry.
We also have, dishonoring the family unit. So, taking someone from their family and, again, isolating them from their family members. So, not being able to contact people who support them. So, like, taking a young person and removing them from their family unit, not being able to contact their parents or their immediate family, and isolating them from their support system, from their traditional support systems, and not being able to have a relationship with, say, like their parents or their siblings, or the people in their immediate vicinity, because they become their family at that point.
Mm-hmm. Right. Interesting.
um, the next one is absolute authoritarianism without meaningful accountability. Again, this is seeking inappropriate loyalty to their leaders. They have that absolute authoritarianism. They tell them that it's sort of like becoming their gods or their absolute leaders, and it's that inappropriate boundaries again.
Yeah, like and it kind of leads right into the next one too, the no tolerance for questions or critical inquiry because there is this expectation for that like non-critical devotion, like that blind devotion to one person or to like a group of people who
Right.
are dictating the entire group, right?
Well, they all kind of like link up together. So you're giving your blind devotion to somebody who is a god, and then you ask no questions of them, that it kind of like all interlinks together.
Mm-hmm. And I think of course that just stems back to fear, right? Because it's like that fear and that uncertainty is what conditions what manipulates. Tiffany just said manipulate us somehow. Like that's what manipulates people and
Mhm.
conditions them to kind of have that mentality. Um, Quick comment Tiffany says here, and anyone who left the group, if we were still in the group, we were asked to not talk to those people because the leader was worried we would leak information to that person, or that person would manipulate us somehow. Interesting. Interesting.
So uh, there's there's kind of this sense also that when you're in a cult, you pay to be there in that cult. So you give them like a large sum of your. So like that's why Scientology is considered like cult-like behavior, because you pay to be part of that organization, or you pay to play, or pay to work and be part of that organization. But
Hmm.
there's kind of like no financial disclosure about how they're using that money or what that money is for. It's sort of like
Yeah.
you're just donating your life savings or all of your money to that organization, and they're just kind of like taking it, and they're not telling you how they're using that money or what that
Well,
money's for.
and with Scientology, you're also signing like these ridiculously long contracts, right? Like I saw like evidence of like these like million-year contracts or something to like pledge service to and devotion to Scientology. So
Yeah.
sorry, Tiffany, I missed your one comment. Tiffany says, yes, that's exactly what happened to me when I left. I got bombarded by hateful messages and threats. And then Tiffany's comment continued saying, and anyone who left the group, if they were still in the group, you were asked to not talk to those people because the leader. So yeah, that is definitely very toxic and manipulative behavior.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I'm sorry that happened to you.
Yeah. Mm. Um, so the next one, unreasonable fear of the outside world, such as an impending catastrophe, evil conspiracies, and persecutions.
Yeah,
Yes.
there's definitely a lot of like conspiracy theories and things like that. Um, you know, there was there's an organization called the Moonies that I was learning about recently. My mom was listening to a video about the Moonies, and it's this organization about like I don't know all the specifics of it, because I was just kind of vaguely listening to it. But they kind of like believed in a lot of like end of the world theories and things like that, and like kind of like I have some information about it, but they they were they had like a lot of interesting, not interesting, but like otherworldly ideas about like because they were um, kind of militant a little bit. It's kind of like David Koresh too. They were kind of just a little bit out there about certain things about the end of the world and things like
Yeah, they
that.
were like
And
they're constantly catastrophizing, right?
yeah.
Yeah. Um, the next one is there is no legitimate reason to leave. Former followers are always wrong in leaving, negative or even evil. So, yeah, like so people who choose to leave end up being villainized in every stretch of the imagination.
Well, because when you leave, you're considered like you get so much hate as you're leaving, like you cannot leave. So when you leave, you're considered like the worst. Like you're if you manage to leave, it's like it's almost like you become like a witch or something, or like a dirty person. Like you become like
Hmm.
unclean in some way. They always because you have knowledge on how to leave the cult. So basically, like your knowledge makes it so that you have the ability to inform other people on how to leave the cult. And so they don't want you spreading that knowledge on how to avoid the cult or leave the cult. And so you're considered like a very dangerous person to the livelihood of that cult.
Yeah, definitely. Um, Tiffany says, I heard stories about people who tried to leave Scientology and were harassed, stalked, and threatened. All of that shit, it's terrifying. Arpy says, I heard that Jared Leto has a cult. I don't I've heard that too. I would need to do some research, but I don't know. Tiffany says, yep, I was villainized for leaving, and it sounds like Arby was too. Yeah, that's definitely not a good sign. Like if you leave a group, like if you have to make meaningful boundaries and then they're villainizing you for that, mm-mm. So the next one is followers feel like they never can be good enough. Ooh, that's interesting.
it's always having to prove that loyalty over and over and over again, and that you're
Mm-hmm.
never quite it goes into that always having to prove that loyalty, and that absolute, because it always establishes that absolute authority of the leader, and always having to prove that godliness, that perfection of that leader, that they're always perfect and you're always not perfect, and that you can never quite match up to the perfectionist of that person. And so you're always constantly having to prove yourself to that leader, and that you're never quite matching up to what that leader is showing you.
Yeah. It's interesting, like adding onto it too. Like, I feel like if we look at a lot of cults, like we often see leaders, like whenever there are points of doubt, like they will find ways to martyr themselves
Mhm.
to whatever the cause is that they're believing in, as a form to garner sympathy points and lull people back into that devotion, right?
Yeah.
That's like, I mean, we remember we did it in an episode, was it earlier this season, about the being a martyr. Take that and like times it times 10 for like an entire group of people, essentially.
Yeah.
Hmm. Gotten some comments here. RP says, I wasn't villainized like Tiff, but I am proud of her for standing her ground. Exactly. Tiffany says, exactly. The group I was in doesn't want anyone talking about the truth behind the group, and they try to shut anyone down who dares do so. And then Tiffany says, gosh, so many things y'all are talking about are what happened to me. Although we didn't have to pay to get in, we had to be invited,
Oh
right?
goodness.
Yeah, but what do you think? Like, we have to also think about like we're not necessarily always talking about monetary compensation. What else are you sacrificing in order to join like something of that nature, right?
Yeah. It's kind of like
Freedom.
this exclusive club or something, like
Like
that you have to be like, yeah.
you're sacrificing freedom, potentially mental health, potentially a whole variety of different things. Let's see, is there another one? I think
The
there's.
group leader, the group or person in charge is always right. Again, that authoritarian, that godlike complex of that person in charge is always right.
Mhm.
And then finally, the group slash leader is the exclusive means of knowing the truth or receiving validation. And there's no other process of discovery that is really acceptable or credible. So all of that group knowledge, everything that they have is the only acceptable means of knowledge, and that there's no other truth or knowledge that you can gain from that.
Mhm. Yeah.
Like there's no other outside sources that you could pull from that will only the group knows the truth.
Yeah. Absolutely. I guess, like, so obviously, what makes these behaviors and patterns bad, dangerous, scary, or terrifying? I mean, a whole variety of different things.
Well, it basically it's doing a lot of things that it's destroying your ability of autonomy. That's the first thing, that it's destroying your ability to maintain your personal freedoms, maintaining your personal relationships with other people, maintaining your personal financial status, that you're not able to maintain a livelihood for yourself, that they're taking all of your money, your livelihood, your family relations. It's basically destroying your life, kind of like slowly entropying everything from you, and then taking away, even in some circumstances, your whole existence, that they will take your life from you, um, and eventually discard you, and kill you.
Yeah. Hmm. No, and it's like, I think, like that I think the freedom component, that is absolutely the biggest component of it. It's what makes it so terrifying. Like, I also find just like that blind devotion conditioning to be really terrifying too. Because if you go and read any stories or watch any videos about people who have left cults, like, it takes them years, if that, to undo the damage that's done, right?
Mhm.
Like the sheer level of damage that's done to people, I think, is what's really scary because it's so resounding.
Mhm.
And it's people have to be constantly vigilant about how they heal from that
Yeah.
type of trauma, right? Because that's really what it is. It's trauma.
Yeah.
Let's see. RP says it like the cult they experienced was like an online version of Mean Girls. Oh no.
Oh goodness.
Um, Tiffany says, yeah, my mental health was in the toilet when I was in that group because I was having really bad attachment and abandonment issues.
Oh
So,
goodness.
and I think, I mean, piecing that together, and Tiffany, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but like it sounds like whoever was in charge of this group would kind of lull you into a sense of security, but then the moment maybe they wanted something or had a certain expectation, like was abandonment like part of the threat, right? Like was that like kind of what was dangled over you both?
Yeah.
Um,
They created a toxic situation in which it was sort of like a trap that you were stuck in a situation in which
mhm,
you felt like you couldn't leave.
right. And Tiffany says, RB, no, I think the plastics were angels compared to these people. Even Regina George would have been pissed. And it sounds like RB left in solidarity with how Tiffany was being treated. Wow. But that's really what also makes it insidious too, is that like part of that conditioning, that devotion, that blind devotion suggests or convinces people that they need to be in that setting, right? That their
Mhm.
life, their safety, their everything depends on it. Um, well, let's talk about like marginalized groups. So, like, how have cults affected the LGBTQ plus community? Ooh, we could really go and talk about this.
Do you want to talk about the Westboro Baptist Church?
The Westboro Baptist Church from good old Kansas,
Yeah.
right? Aren't they in Topeka, Kansas still? I think
Uh,
so.
I'm not sure, but we had experiences with them at college.
Yeah, like Ari and I have firsthand experience with the Westboro Baptist Church. So, I remember one of my first, I think this probably was my first awareness to cults and their
Mhm.
existence.
Yeah.
So, the Westboro Baptist Church visits a lot of college campuses and they proselytize um, on these campuses. And I was walking to class one morning. I remember it was like 8:30 in the morning. I was walking to my EDU 290 class. And I was like, I'm going to go learn how to teach today. And I'm just like sauntering. And suddenly I hear the derogatory F slur hollered at me from across the courtyard.
Uh-huh.
And
Right.
I'm like, I stop in
Right.
my tracks and I look over. And this dude dressed in like a suit is coming toward me with a Bible and hollering at me, being like, "You're a sinner, like you're gonna go to hell forever and burn brutally." And I'm just like, I'm just going to class right now. Like I was in such shock, and I remember sitting in that class being so rattled and unsettled by this exchange that I was like, if this person is still here on my way back, I'm going to say something. So on my way
Yeah.
back from class, there was an entire group of students and media and everything. I think you were there too. I'm fairly sure that like
I
we were
think
both at this.
I avoided it because, I knew how bad it was, and, I knew that I knew how dangerous they were, but I knew that there were other religious people on campus like that all the time. But I knew Westboro Baptist was there, and I tried to
Hmm.
my journalism professor wanted us to go interview them, and get their because they said that, the point of journalism was to get uh, all sides and to get all freedom of speech. And so it was sort of like that it was considered it's considered the point of journalism to take into account all sides. And so that was kind of part of the reason why I had a hard
Hmm.
time becoming a journalist is because I had a hard time taking into account a lot of these hateful perspectives as a writer.
Yeah.
That as a person who is a writer, it's hard for me to be objective as a writer, um, to be objective and to take this hateful rhetoric and to see the other side of things.
Hmm.
And so I just as somebody who that I couldn't just let them speak without feeling a sense of wanting to interject my opinion. And so I knew that I would be kind of a terrible journalist in that sense, that I wouldn't be able to interject my opinions. Um, so I kind of just avoided it, and worked on a different story instead.
Hmm.
But it was just really difficult, because I was and I knew that a lot of traumatic experiences like that were going to come up as a journalist, but that was kind of one of the experiences that I kind of had to avoid. Was kind of
Yeah.
part
For
of the
your
break in
well-being.
that wall of my as I got a journalism degree, that I was like, oh, I really can't be a journalist. This is dreadful. Um, but that was
Mm.
that was one of those things that I was just like, this is very, very hard.
Wow, yeah. Now, I can imagine that would be really hard. Tiffany says, "Are you serious? Your journalism professor wanted you to put yourself in a potentially dangerous situation?"
Yeah, absolutely. I
Yeah.
mean, that's what it means to be a journalist, is that you're going to put yourself in dangerous situations all the time. That's what it means
Hmm.
to be a journalist.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's interesting because like I remember that gathering. Because no, there were a lot of people from our religious diversity group that were there too, and I remember that like everybody was so angry at these people proselytizing that like they just were overpowered by like everybody else being like, get off our campus, blah. And that lasted a whole week. And I think I remember, so the Westboro Baptist Church wasn't always at CMU, but like they like other groups, like you were saying earlier, would come as well. And like these other groups would have like very similar like stances and perspectives. And now I do like one very vivid memory that I have at CMU with the Westboro Baptist Church was they came, was it in 2009? They came in 2009 and they invited, I think it was a journalism professor who invited them into a classroom
Mhm.
to give like a debate or a talk or like a panel. And I
Yep.
remember that they took Lady Gaga's song Poker Face and they like manipulated it and rewrote it to fit like their
That sounds about right.
it's I sincerely think that this is on the internet still because like it's just the Westboro Baptist Church
Yeah.
um
I
in
just
a classroom.
I just remember, like, a lot during that time period, and maybe they still do it. They would go to, like, veterans' funerals, and, like, they would protest veterans' funerals and things like that, and they would, like, put up their signs and things like that, just doing, like, mostly disrespectful things like that, where they would just, like, go across the street and just, like, say hateful rhetoric about, like, gay people and stuff during veterans' funerals.
Yeah. Matthew Shepard's funeral, I believe it was the Westboro Baptist Church that went there to try to protest it, but there was a counter protest
Yeah.
that like that took precedence over them. Like so like a lot of these groups will do whatever they can to kind of like insert themselves
Mhm.
um into whatever situation they can in order to develop visibility because at the end of the day that like they won't say that that's what they want, but at the end of the day that's really what they want. They want some sort of visibility.
Yeah.
They want exposure,
Yeah.
because in exposure comes power, you know. And
Absolutely.
that's what it always is. It's always like exerting power. um
Mhm.
oh, I forgot about that Tiffany. They also protested at the funerals for like the Sandy Hook victims.
Yeah.
I will never forget that. And I was just like, are you kidding me?
Mhm.
Are you kidding me? Now that I think about it, that's another, isn't that another current event snapshot? We forgot there was a shooting down in Georgia recently.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think we talked did we talk about that? I didn't know
We
if we
may have
talked
talked,
about
I
it.
think we may have talked about that in the last episode now that I think about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So are there any other aspects regarding being LGBTQ plus and how cults have affected our community?
So we talked about the Moonies, a little bit, and they were very strong anti-LGBTQ plus. Um, but let's talk about somebody who was pro LGBTQ plus and used it as a form of control. We have Jim Jones in the People's Temple. He came out
Mm-hmm.
as being because what he would do is he would use and this is kind of like he would use sex as a form of control. Um, using his trying to establish himself as kind of like a leader, and because that's kind of like a cult like behavior is using sex as a form of control, and so he would
Mm-hmm.
have sex with men and women. So he had homosexual tendencies is what they're talking about, but really I think it was just kind of a way of controlling people that he
Mm-hmm.
would use sex with anybody, I think, as a form of control. And so this article that I read talked about his homosexual tendencies, that he would pick up men from gay bars and try to get them to join his cult as a form of control, and try to get them to follow him as a way of controlling them.
Interesting. Well, and it just goes to show you that, like, you know, any group of people can be manipulated into this type of thing,
Yeah.
right? It's all like I know I often have this conversation about why I think education is so important because at the end of the day, like the more skills that we develop when it comes to like critical thinking and rhetoric, I think we're able to
Hmm.
kind of like examine such things and disempower them before they
Yeah.
become like a serious issue, right?
Hmm.
But the truth is, like, if there are no resources for people who are vulnerable, though, too, like, you know, those vulnerable people will end up gravitating to someone who ends up giving them any semblance of hope,
Or
right?
acceptance.
Or acceptance in that instance, yes. Is there another one by any chance?
So we have Children of God, aka you might know them as the Family. This religious group
Not
is
the
known for
most
many
inventive
things.
name.
This group was known for many things, including sexual abuse by its leader and members. Another, normal, not normal, it's not normal, but that's a typical thing that happens with a lot of these cults, is that they use sex as a form of control and abuse. Um, there were a lot of, I don't want to get into a lot of the specifics about it because it's quite sad,
Hmm.
but they were very anti-LGBTQ plus, because they were a very religious group, but they were not a very pleasant group. Getting into the
Yeah,
specifics.
yeah. Um, so Tiffany says, well, I can say that the group I was in has no power over me anymore. They can eat my dust because I'm never going back. My mental health has improved significantly since I left. I'm glad that your mental health has improved since you left. Um, and so like, I think one of the last things that we are going to talk about tonight, because by the way, we are going to be doing a part two to this episode because as we were going through and writing our notes, I think Ari and I, like, we quickly realized that we have like 3 pages of notes. So part two of this talk is probably going to talk more so about um, cult behavior in like politics, especially being that we are getting so close to an election. We're going to probably end up talking about that. But before we get to that, like, I think it's important, like, especially Arby and Tiffany, since you both have been here sharing your context with us and your experiences, talking about cults on the internet and like how, celebrity culture in any varying way can exhibit cultish behavior. We've already talked about Scientology, right?
Mhm.
Um, Tiffany and Arpa, you've talked about your experience with this social group that you've been in. Ari, have you ever been in like an online group that's like that? I guess would fit many of the definitions of this type of behavior.
Um, I don't know if well, maybe. I definitely have been part of, like, message boards and stuff, and sometimes it feels you get cult of personality and stuff, and sometimes it does feel a little cult-like sometimes. You follow, like, a celebrity and stuff. Um, Sometimes it feels a little cult-like at times, but not, in a way that
Hmm.
maybe, um, but it doesn't meet all of the criteria of cult-like behavior, I suppose. It's
Right.
it's
Yeah.
it's more like cult light, you know, like, you can definitely leave at any time, but, definitely if you, go against the celebrity in that group, you're going to get, bashed pretty harshly, you know what I mean?
Oh, light. I mean, honestly, some fandoms that I'm in, like, I wonder, like, there's a lot of cultish behavior. Like, for me, like, I view a sign of that as like if somebody that we idolize does something wrong, how does one react? And the people who will defend those people, even at their own expense or at the expense of other people, like to
Right,
me, that is a very concerning and slippery slope to go down.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's sort of like people who will defend these celebrities and sometimes problematic behavior even, and it'll be like they'll even to their own detriment sometimes, and it'll be like they'll just and sometimes it'll be like they'll defend, these celebrities, and the celebrity doesn't even know they exist, and it'll be like, why are you defending somebody who doesn't even know who you are? Like, why are you arguing about
Hmm.
something that and they'll argue with their friends or their family and stuff, be like, "You don't understand." And it's like,
Right.
"I don't
Yeah.
think you understand. You're defending somebody who doesn't, it's just a
It,
little bit it's a little bit harsh sometimes, and I think that sometimes, I think that we don't
yeah.
have perspective. It's that celebrity culture that we get so wrapped up in our own ideas in our head about, celebrity, and, we get hold so firm to these ideas about celebrity,
It's
and
the
I think that
group think.
yeah,
We get
and
so caught up in the group think.
well, I think that sometimes it provides comfort for people
Hmm.
that, it's sort of like it binds, it's something that we can like all gather around and be like, we have something in common, and it's this one individual, and we think that other people feel the same way we do, or that it provides something for us, something that maybe
Right.
is lacking in our lives, or something that we're, not having. But the
Right.
thing about it is that I don't know, it's such a trap. It's such it's one of those culture traps that we get into, and it's so dangerous, and I've fallen I'm not above it. I've fallen into those culture traps myself.
Oh,
Um,
same.
and
Absolutely same.
the thing about it is that if you I think that, because we have how can you avoid cult-like behavior or cult-like thing? And one of the biggest things I think is binary thinking. This black and white thinking that, this person's great or this person's awful, or like, and I think that, treating celebrity culture as like this person is just a human being, because
Hmm.
I think that we have people like Chappell Roan who are like vehemently, you know, destroying this idea about celebrity, that they're like, "I do not want to be a celebrity. You're all weird and creepy, and I do not wanna talk to you in public. Do not take my picture in public," and is, like, very much against, like, this idea about celebrity culture and the cult of personality, and, like
Very like very much adhering to her boundaries that she's
yeah,
set, right? And I think that's another thing, like to avoid cult like thinking, um, like avoiding compromising your boundaries when someone in authority or that tries to paint themselves as authority, or someone who takes on like this level of martyred leadership expect you to drop those boundaries for them,
Mhm.
at your expense. Like to
Yeah.
me, that's something to avoid doing too.
Yeah. Also, I think the idea of like othering people who don't like your celebrity or like what you like, if you don't hate on those people who don't like the things that you like, or the ideas that you have, if you don't hate on those, if you listen to their opinions and
Hmm.
um, I think that we can at least learn something from each other, up to a point, um, I think that, there is, we talked about, like, the racist rhetoric online and stuff like that. I don't think that there's a lot to learn about that. I do listen to it, but, I don't learn a whole lot from some of that stuff from, certain groups and organizations, but, I
Hmm.
definitely have listened to it and, given pause about it, but it's definitely, you know, but, yeah, I have a lot to say about that the political, or, stuff
And we
we
have
might
a
have to
whole
do it.
part. We have a whole part two for that, friends. I hope you're ready ready for it. So, just some final comments here. Tiffany says, "Yeah, it's like celebs are seen as perfect in worship until they make a mistake, and then they're seen as like being reincarnated Satan. Granted, some celebs in question actually are." And then RB says, "I don't think celebrities are perfect either." Um, I think, in conclusion, we've established that the line between community versus cult is when it crosses the boundary of, robbing people of their freedoms for sure, their autonomy, their self-actualization, right? And like I think the thing is it's taken on so many different forms that it can almost be very insidious, right? But I think that's why examining the different ones and how they've worked, I think it's important to kind of unpack that. Like that the fact that the human condition is so diverse that even cults can be diverse in the way they impose on people, right?
I think just being critical of what this group, joining when you join a group or like, an organization or something, being critical of what they're asking of you. Like, what are they asking of me, and what do they want from me? And because sometimes it'll start small. They'll ask you like a
Mm-hmm.
small thing, and then it'll get bigger and bigger. Be like frog in a stew pot. It'll be
Mm-hmm.
something small. It'll be like, and listen to your body. Your body tells you things, when you have a reaction to it and you feel uncomfortable. You feel that discomfort in your body. I
Yeah,
think that's something that you, inherently know that there's something wrong. I think.
I agree with you completely. No, I think that's a good way. That's a good place to end tonight. No, this is a good conversation, everybody, and we are going to continue this specific conversation in part two when we get to April, or not April, but I'm getting my months mixed up. When we get to October. But in the meantime, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Subscribe to Ari's channels, Tarot Time with Ari, Strange Nothings, and Boocha Baby. And of course, don't forget, we love you, and we will see you next time. Bye.
Stay safe.